Hello everyone. So this week I read this book, and this is Think Again: How to Reason and Argue by Walter Sinnott Armstrong. That's a brilliant name, isn't it? Oh, one of my viewers pointed out to me on a previous video that everything's always backwards, which I had never even noticed before. It's because I use the selfie camera on my phone to shoot these videos. So apologies, I'd never realised that. I hope it's never been an issue for you. What's this book about? This is another one of those books that I didn't intend to buy. I went into the bookstore looking for something by Jean-Paul Sartre because I wanted to learn more about him. He's always coming up in conversation with people. And actually it turns out he's probably the biggest philosophical influencer of Western thought in the last 100 years, because he was a very good writer who, through plays and novels and everything, popularized his own ideas, which were essentially existentialism. He tried to make those fit within Marxism and humanism, because when existentialism came about, probably largely due to Soren Kierkegaard, most philosophers in the West were still deeply Christian, and Christianity affected. This is irrelevant, of course, because I'm meant to be talking about this book, so I just went off on a tangent there. Apologies. So this book is very interesting. This book reminds me a lot of How to Think Like a Philosopher by Julian Baggini, which is, for me, a very, very important book on philosophy because it made philosophy real. I said to somebody recently that it may have been on one of these reviews, that before reading that book, philosophy had been something I read and it made me feel clever. It was like picking up a shiny object and thinking, oh, don't I look good? I never really understood what the object was for, though, back then. Reading Baggini's books teaches you how to use the shiny object. And the shiny object, let's say it's an exercise machine. It's an exercise machine for your brain, for your thoughts. And the more time you spend with them, the more of philosophy you understand, the better you're able to develop your thinking power, your reasoning power. It's not just reasoning, your ability to just do anything. If you can think better, you can do things better. This book is a lot like that, and it's a lot like How to Think Like a Philosopher because it's pretty much the same thing. How to reason and argue is a large part of philosophy because philosophy is about getting to the truth of things, if such a thing exists. And one way to do that is through arguments, not arguments as in two people, ripping each other's guts out verbally or just having a go at each other, but arguing to get to the bottom of an issue or to resolve an issue or to better understand an issue. So if somebody says to you, I think A, you say, okay, why do you think A? And I think A because of B, and then and it's kind of like the old argument that everybody knows is all men have a Y chromosome. You have a Y chromosome, therefore you are a man. That's the form of an argument, and he goes over a lot of those forms in this book. So it's quite a how-to book, how to spot an argument, how to spot an argument that is valid, one that is not valid, how to spot a good argument, how to construct a good argument, how to deconstruct a good argument. Well, why do we need to do that? Well, one of the reasons he wrote this book is because he teaches a course on this. I'll read you a bit about him at the back. And a lot of the people who've taken his course, over 800,000 people have taken his course online, by the way, have said to him that it's really improved their life because it's taught them to see things for what they are, taught them to get to the bottom of things. There's a lot of value in being able to do this. Let me read you the back of this. Walter Sinnott Armstrong is Chauncey Stillman Professor of Practical Ethics in the Department of Philosophy and the Kennan Institute for Ethics at Duke University. His Coursera class, Think Again: How to Reason and Argue, is one of the most popular massive open online courses in the world. His books include Morality Without God and Moral Skepticisms. On the back, is there a constructive way to argue? I believe there is. I wrote an article about this a little while ago. How can we spot and avoid bad reasoning? Can we understand our opponents? while he was teaching, while he has been teaching, one of the things he always used to do, he said, was during American presidential campaigns, he'd consider the arguments of both sides, and there were always arguments, there were good arguments. In the 80s, some in the 90s, and now there's an absolute glut. There's no arguments, it's just insulting each other, trading slogans, it's advertising. And because there's a lack of those arguments, he thinks that's partly responsible for the cultural glut. What cultural glut? Well, look at the morons running the fucking world. Look at the morons running the world right now. And look at the state of the world. The West is now a laughing stock that cannot invoke international law, largely because of its support for Israel. Um, the West is becoming increasingly fascist. The middle class is pretty much being wiped out by this, this fetishism for free market capitalism that never really has worked. It's more like a feudal system now, with the rich buy and control the government. I mean, Elon Musk, richest man in the world, is unelected de facto prime minister in America, which is destroying its democracy. It's more like an authoritarian dictatorship now, with Trump even introducing laws so that anybody who opposes anything he does, including judges, can be prosecuted as a threat to national security. It's crazy. Would we have ever got there if people had not forgotten how to argue? I don't know. That's why this book was written. So, let's go through some of it, because it really is a good book. Let me read you some of the chapters, and you'll get an idea of it. So, here we go. It starts with our cultural rut. There's something called toxic talk, the sound of silencing, what arguments can do, why learn to argue, how to spot arguments, how to stop arguments, how to complete arguments, how to evaluate arguments, how to avoid fallacies. So that's a lot like the what's the other book? Do They Think You're Stupid? Also by Julian Baggini, about all these fallacies that people throw at you to try and convince you of stuff with no real basis for it. They're just taking you for a moron, and you would be if you let them take you. And most people have, I guess, haven't they? I'm going to actually read you the intro to this book. Obviously, I'm quite a fan of this book. This is only 2 pages, not the intro, beg your pardon. This is the preface, why I wrote this book. I have taught courses on reason and argument for over 35 years at Dartmouth College and now Duke University. Many students tell me that my courses have helped them in various areas of their lives. They motivate me to keep going. While my students learned to argue, the rest of the world lost that skill. The level of discourse and communication in politics and also in personal life has reached new lows. During election years, my course has always discussed examples of arguments during presidential debates. During the 1980s, I had no trouble finding arguments on both sides in the debates. Today, all I find are slogans, assertions, jokes, jibes, but very few real arguments. I see dismissals, put-downs, abuse, accusations, and avoidance of the issue more than actual engagement with problems that matter. There might be fewer protests in the street today than in the 1960s, but there are still few serious attempts to reason together and understand each other. I could not help but conclude that our culture, like my students, could benefit from a strong dose of reason and argument. When I moved to Duke in 2010, I was offered a chance to reach a wider audience through the magical medium of MOOCs, M-O-O-C-S. That is Massive Online Open Courses. With my friend Ram Netta, I taught a MOOC, think again, on the Coursera platform. That has attracted over 800,000 registered students from over 150 countries. This surprising response convinced me of a hunger around the world for learning how to reason and argue. Of course, not all of my students finished the course, much less learned how to argue. Well, many did. My hope is that their new skills help them to understand and work together with their neighbors. I'm a book reviewer who can't read properly at the moment. This is good, isn't it? The book that you have in your hands, that I have in my hands, or on your screen, there you go, is another step in that direction. My goal is to show what arguments are and what they can do. This book is not about winning arguments or beating opponents. This bit's important. Instead, it is about understanding each other and appreciating strong evidence. It teaches logic instead of rhetorical tricks. Although this book started as a manual on how to argue, I realized that I also needed to start by explaining why people should argue. That motivational discussion then grew into part 1, why argue? The lessons on how to argue then became part 2, complemented by an overview of how not to argue in part 3. By the end of the book, I hope that you will be both willing and able to argue and assess arguments, as well as to provide motivation and a model for others to join you in constructive engagement. These skills can improve not only your life, but also our shared society. It's a very good book. More practical, with more, you know, spot this word, spot that word, this follows from that examples, which are interesting if you can be bothered to follow it. Then the more theoretical, open minded, when I say open minded, I mean less pencil and paper uh, exercises, um, more thinking exercises that you might find in Bajini's books. But actually, you know what? I reckon you should read them both. Bajini's brilliant. This guy's really good. And, with a name like Walter Sinner Armstrong, which I just think was fantastic. Why would you not read his book? See, that's an appeal to authority, which is one of the things he points out here. If somebody seems like an authority figure, then you say, you should do this because they are so great. Yeah, you should read this book because it's got a great name, which is a stupid argument, but it's the kind of thing that gets thrown at us all the time. Then there's ad hominem, which is you don't attack the argument or the product or anything. You just, why would you read a book from someone with such a stupid name? Nothing to do with the book, right? It's to do with the name. All examples, which you can find more examples of in here. Very good book. I'm giving it a serious 9 out of 10. Only 10 out of 10 goes 10 out of 10 goes to Bajini. Just because I like his writing style more. But actually, this book challenged me a bit more, so I think it should get a 10 out of 10. And it is Think Again, How to Reason and Argue by Walter Sinner Armstrong. It's number 21 in the, where's my camera gone? Pelican books. And there's a whole lot of good Pelican books, I want to read some of these. There's a list of them in the back. Number 1, Economics, The User's Guide by Ha-Joon Chang. Ha-Joon Chang is brilliant. Number 2, Human Evolution. Could be interesting, by Robin Dunbar. Revolutionary Russia, 1891 to 1991, Orlando Feeks. Number 3. Number 4, The Domesticated Brain by Bruce Hood. What's that about? Number 5, Greek and Roman Political Ideas by Melissa Lane. Number 6, Classical Literature by Richard Jenkins. Number 7, Who Governs Britain? Elon Musk, isn't it? I don't know. Right. Well, who's that dick face? Reese Moggs, who said, oh, if Trump gets in charge, it'll be so great because we'll finally be able to reap all the benefits of Brexit. He's been going about the benefits of Brexit and reaping them eventually for 10 years now? I don't know. But he's disappeared. He's gone all quiet. Maybe even he realizes how stupid he looks. How to See the World by Nicholas Mirzoff. Number 8. Number 9, The Meaning of Science, Tim Lewins. Number 10, Social Class in the 21st Century. That would be interesting, by Mike Savage. Number 11, The European Union, A Citizen's Guide. Well, you can kiss that goodbye. Chris Bickerton. There's actually talk right now of creating a sort of like a Western UN force, a major political, military, peacekeeping, legal force, without America, because America's just been so crackpot and exposed themselves just for a bunch of colonial warmongers, thanks to Israel peeling the mask off of them again and again and doing this to everything to do with international law. But I'm not going to go to the end of the list because this is already 13 minutes. Hope you enjoyed it. Very good book. Highly recommended. Bye.